Hey, welcome to the Growth Whisperers podcast, where everything we talk about is relating to helping leaders and their teams build enduring, great businesses. I'm Kevin Lawrence, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Brad Giles. How you doing, Brad?
Hello, how you doing? It's good to see you.
Yeah, you too. So what do we have today? It's, today's topics, we got a good list, but before we get into today's topics, we want to talk about why we started this podcast and the video version for those of you that prefer video. So what are we hoping to achieve? Who is it for? Brad, what's this idea all about?
Thanks, Kevin. I suppose you and I have been chatting about this for on and off, maybe a year or two. I remember distinctly being at the Formula One in Melbourne, and we were talking about this kind of idea. But the reason behind it is that what we find is that we come across so many fantastic ideas in our work with leaders, and we share it with each other. But we wanted, I suppose, an opportunity to discuss that with one another and perhaps share it with a wider audience.
Yeah, and as we discussed, we didn't want to sit here on a podcast talking to ourselves because literally it's not as much fun, but yet we have huge insights that we gain from these great leaders that we both get to work with around the world. So we're excited to kick this off. This is designed for CEOs, leaders, and executives of companies or even charitable organizations or any group that is really trying to make something happen and kind of scale what they're doing. They're ambitious people. They want to learn and they want to troubleshoot some of the more challenging issues. And the real deal too is the catalyst that kind of got us over the edge was this interesting virus thing that we're experiencing here in early 2020. And that kind of said, Brad and I, we started talking and sharing some stuff. We go, you know what? We got to share this with more people because we both think very differently and have different views and styles and brains, although we're both committed to helping people to grow. So that was kind of the catalyst, so if you will, and then and now here we are.
Yeah, I guess broadly, we want to help people build enduring great companies. And I know that you do it, Kevin, with the clients that you work with, and I certainly do as well. And yeah, I guess we want to expand our reach and our impact to be able to help more people.
Yeah, because the things that we learn are amazing because we get to test theories and test techniques and test principles and then see what actually works. So yeah, some great ideas to share and a lot of wisdom from our clients along the way.
Awesome. So let's move on. I guess the subject for today that we really want to talk about is how does this play out for the rest of 2020? It's a question that we're getting certainly a lot in that I'm getting certainly a lot in the interactions that I'm having with different clients and other folk. It really feels like as we look out at the moment, we can see the next few days and then it's just this dark fog and we don't know what's beyond that. And a lot of leaders are confused and just looking for some way. So yeah, that's really what we want to talk about today. Yes. But before we get into that, I want to just ask, who are Brad and Kevin? It's our first episode. So Kevin, tell us a bit about yourself. How did you end up working with amazing CEOs?
Yeah, it's a funny story and it goes back longer than I'd like to admit. More than 25 years ago, I was in the advertising industry. I'd always been an entrepreneur and put myself through college and that with my own businesses. And, I started selling painted rocks and tadpoles as a kid. So I've got this entrepreneurial DNA. But I was in the ad industry and kind of got a bit disgruntled and heard of this thing called coaching. And I started doing it and I didn't know what I was doing, but I started working with small entrepreneurs because I have a passion for entrepreneurship and building things. And it just kind of expanded. And next thing you know, I ended up, consulting and working with clients around the world. I spent 13 years working regularly in the Middle East. I still work in India, Australia, Europe, US, Canada. And it's been this amazing education and journey to help people to grow their companies and have a great life too. That's my passion. I was a key contributor to a book called Scaling Up for Scaling Businesses. I wrote a second book about scaling yourself and enduring the challenges and the pressures, how relevant, called Your Oxygen Mask First and How to Take Care of Yourself and Grow as a Leader. So I spent a life in study in many ways. I'm a professional student and teacher and collaborator and coach and advisor and just absolutely love it, which is where we met, Brad.
Yeah, absolutely. What would it be, 8 years ago, perhaps?
Yep.
Yeah.
So about you.
This is the part where you ask me about
exactly.
Who am I, Brad?
So Brad, how about you?
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, so I guess I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've started six companies in a variety of different fields. Started my first business when I was about 16, but I've just always been passionate and loved business. And I suppose more than that, I've really been passionate about building great businesses, whether they were my business or the businesses with the people that I work with. And we spend most of our time at work. We spend a lot more time at work than we do with our families. So I'm pretty passionate about building great businesses that people love to work at. And there's a whole range about that. I could talk about that for a long time. But what I'd like to do is step into our opening thought for today. So really, the question that we're talking about today is, how does this play out? But it really comes back to a thing called the Stockdale Paradox. Now, you and I probably first came across that in Jim Collins' book. I think it was Good to Great.
I think so. Yes, it's one of his books. I think it was Good to Great. We should check that.
Yeah, we should check that. But it's really, really relevant now. So I'm just going to quickly read that out. Jim Stockdale was an American pilot in the Vietnam War. He was captured and made into a prisoner of war. He spent 8 gruesome years in a war camp in Vietnam while being tortured almost daily. After he was able to escape, he explained how he survived and why both optimists and pessimists were the first ones to die in the camp. The paradox goes like this: you must retain faith that you will prevail in the end, regardless of the difficulties. And at the same time, you must confront the brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they might be.
I love it. You know, what's interesting, and I know for you and I both, this is something we're talking about a lot with people that we're dealing with, the CEOs that, I've been on calls with around the world in the last few weeks. And because some people are concerned about being too optimistic.
Yeah.
And some people are concerned about being too pessimistic and almost afraid to lay out some of the bad news with their people. And we go back to the Stockdale Paradox as the answer, because it is the best mindset. And I, even for myself, my own experience and what I've seen with some other leaders is looking at that worst case scenario, making sure you're okay with it and planning for it. Like literally, how do we handle this worst case scenario, or locked up for a year or whatever it happens to be? And then work like crazy with that strong foundation towards the scenario that you want. So it's like connect to the truth and the potential pain, and then just go and then lay on your optimism and your hope and your will to get somewhere else, but from a foundation of truth, not just happiness and flowers and everything else.
Yeah, absolute belief that you will prevail in the end. So if we use that in this scenario, absolutely knowing the human race will go on. People will still do business. People will still purchase things, but we need to confront the brutal facts of today and not be overly optimistic and not be overly pessimistic or catastrophize. We need to retain that faith and get through that period of time. Now, what the question is, of course, is what is that period of time that we'll get to in a moment, but retaining faith that we will get there and we will prevail in the end. Because as Jim Collins says in the Stockdale Paradox, it was the optimists and the pessimists that passed away first.
And in the context of the companies that we're working with, and with your company, an example is one of the CEOs that we work with in Europe. What they did is they went to the staff and saying, they actually laid out, here is the worst case scenario, right? And here's all the things in between we can do to mitigate it to the best of our abilities. And we don't know how long it's going to be or how it's going to go, but they just laid out, here's our method for managing it. We're going to have our daily meetings where we're going to work through it. We're going to have a deep dive on the data and reforecast every week. And we're going to inform you to the best of our abilities. Our intent is to keep all of our great people employed. But if things drop at certain levels, we're going to have to lay people off, although we don't want to. And when it climbs back out again, then we will want to rehire those people. But there will be periods of times that we're going to avoid, but that is with the plan. And for them, that kind of transparency and painting the reality of both parts of the picture, people liked it because it made them feel comfortable that there was a clear plan and they're being truthful, even though there was certainty in that there was a plan, although there was uncertainty around the environment. In that case, that's what really resonated.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's move on to the main question that we're seeing at the
Mhm.
moment. And that is around predicting the future. So what are you hearing on this, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean that is the question that people are trying to guess, and people are saying, well, some people think it's going to go for a month or so. One executive team I was talking to figured mid-April we're back in business, baby, and I jumped on a call with them and helped them to have an alternate perspective, because I love optimism, but that was not in your financial modeling. You do not want that kind of optimism, and same with cash. And other people are thinking, how does it play out the rest of this year? So I mean, it's all over the map, Brad. You and I have talked about a couple different data sources.
Yeah.
The sort of the current theme. A lot of people are saying, and now I'm in Canada, deeply connected to the U.S., but in the North American market, people starting to come out of their houses again and get back to work. You know, late May, early June, July, in that range. But it's not a flipping the switch back on at that point if that happens.
Yeah.
Other people are talking about scenarios where the office might not be full for a year,
Yeah.
for 18 months. Maybe partial teams coming in or chunks of teams coming in at different times. And the reality, there's this huge range, and everyone's making their best guess. So it's all over the map.
Yeah. I guess from what I'm seeing, Um, I think that right now we're in a phase of conserving cash, making
Mhm.
sure that we can stop the bleeding. If I don't know, 50, 60, 70% of businesses are not growing, whatever that number is. So if they're not growing, or if their revenues have dropped significantly, the focus is to have business continuity to survive until, I'm going to just say, about June 30, and that's within the time frame that you just said.
Yep.
So getting to about June 30 so that you can then have a plan to be profitable from then on. So if we think about the way most of the countries have shut down, it's been in stages. First of all, it might have been, well, we're going to change our health warning, don't travel to China, and
Yep.
then maybe close the borders or close international flights to China. And then they've just gradually ratcheted it down through these levels or phases to get to the point where we are today. And maybe some areas have got further to go. But let's think about that in reverse over a long period of time. So bit by bit,
Exactly.
what we're going to see is governments relaxing as the number of new cases have dropped significantly or aren't growing. We're going to see, I think, a relaxation of those levels bit by bit. It's not going to be, okay, it's the 1st of June, let's open the whole economy. It's going to be little by little, and then they're going to try to squash outbreaks as they appear.
Yeah, so there was a metaphor in a conversation I was having with a CEO. It's like we're really close to Whistler Mountain up here in Vancouver, Canada. And it's
Yeah.
like the way the world kind of shut down was like doing a run and skiing all the way down Whistler Mountain.
Yeah.
And the way that it's going to open up again is like hiking back up manually up to the top of the mountain. So you come
Yeah.
down in 10 minutes, you hike up in 10 hours or
Yeah.
something to that effect. If you're to hike up to the top, it's probably about right. So metaphorically, fast slide down and then gradual build up, as long as we don't hit an icy patch and slip back down again.
Yeah. So how can we help our clients to prepare for that? Because that's really the question. How does it play out? We've got these scenarios where we know the doors aren't going to open immediately. It's going to be this long, gradual escalation. And let's be fair, we may get to Christmas time and we still might maybe in a similar situation. We just don't know. I don't want to be overly pessimistic. I want to maintain the middle ground per the Stockdale Paradox. But how can customers, how can CEOs and leaders try to build some kind of business plan? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I mean, the best thing is to still go back to their long-term plans and where they want to be, and even their plan they had for the year, and recalibrate it. So many companies would be doing a simple reforecast every week,
Yeah.
because we don't know what the indicators are of when things will climb. And by the way, we know a bunch of companies are thriving in this. We did a survey of all the CEOs in the past week on our sessions about revenue predictions. Many are still growing, like quite a few. There's a bunch that are flat, and some that have, slowed down, or some that have actually stopped completely, tourism based and things like that. But there is a bunch that are doing well, but they're still not normal. Their people are still working remotely, and they're still troubleshooting all kinds of funny things because of this new way of working. But anyway, so going back to it, many of these people are doing a simple revenue and cash forecast every week. And as I was talking with somebody else today, another advisor that I do some work with, and I was like, well, what's the data we watch to know when the business is going to climb up and how quickly? Well, there's not. The data you can watch is probably your internal demand data, right? And that's what your customers are asking for and requesting, or what your sales team tells you your customers are requesting. But this is really watching the pull in the market for whatever you're doing.
So what do they do if that isn't working? So you're saying that the new demand, it's not there. And there are businesses, let's say I own a cinema complex or a restaurant, or one of many, many other businesses that are out there. What do? I mean, these companies, these leaders are just holding their breath and crossing their fingers. So
Right.
what can they possibly do?
Well, Brad, it's in the name of your firm and my firm. Your firm's got the name evolution, and my firm's got the name growth. So they need to evolve to be able to grow, which is to sit there and get back, in many cases, to the startup mentality. So one of the guys on a call today was newly appointed president of his company. Congratulations, in the job for 4 months. And what he said is, we get to look at the business with a complete clean slate, like we're a garage startup again, although they're much bigger than a garage startup. They get to rethink about all their systems, all their structures, every employee, because they were one of the hardest hits. But they get to look at it from that perspective and really innovate again. So in companies that are still operating, and I'm sure they're grateful for that, it's getting small teams that really take time to think about what could we do differently that meets the needs of the customer. Because that's the boss, right? Like, what does the customer need? What is the customer asking for? And, one of the things that you and I have talked about before, but this is a time where, for many people, the CEO and all the execs out there talking to a lot more customers.
Yeah.
What's going on? What's working? What's not working? What do you need? What do you need? What do you need? What do you need? Like, that's where a lot of it is gonna need to come from. And then from that, we're creative by nature. You'll get lots of ideas. So I think that's the mode people got to be able to shift to is, and even the ones that are doing well today probably need to do the same thing, because demand is going to change. What humans want or need or fear is going to change.
Yeah, I think right now you need a plan. Sounds silly. You always need a plan, right? But let's be fair, if your business right now is not making cash, if it's losing cash, how long can it lose cash for? Question one. Question two, if it can lose cash for 2 months, what do you do after that? Do you run out of money? I think it was Charles Darwin who said it's the agile who survive. It's not the strongest or the fastest. It's the agile. So being able to pivot right now, that's what you've got to do. You've got to have a business plan that will make your business cash flow positive. If it isn't, because I just have no faith that this thing is going to run its course and things will be completely back to normal in 2, 3, 4 weeks.
And ideally, if we're running our companies right, we should have big fat balance sheets and access to cash anyways, because these unpredictable events are predictable. We know they happen, we just don't know when. So that's why the weekly P&L, talking to customers, and the cash flow, looking out a year. So you can get it no different than a startup does. Startups count how many months of cash they have, their runway. And normal operating companies, I think that's something important to consider, so you always know where you stand. And, for those that aren't really, strong on the financial side, also another thing to really be thinking about is looking at those receivables and really checking on the quality of those. There's a lot of companies that may want to pay you with all their heart. They just might not have the cash to do it. And
so what should people do about that? They check them. Tough tough situation at the moment. Cash is really kind of dried up in the economy.
And
Yeah.
it's everything. So, what are people doing? A company I work with down in the US, they hired 2 additional accounts payables clerks, or accounts, yes, accounts payable clerks, 2 additional, just to be working it. In others, the CEOs and executives are getting on the phone because it's the relationships that's going to get the check in the mail these days, right?
Yeah.
And get you to the top of that list. So it becomes a all hands on deck for cash for most companies. And then for a lot of companies are also, everyone started to talk about credit again and having credit policies. I worked with an amazing entrepreneur in the Middle East, and one of the things that he talked about, and in some of his businesses, his teams got really frustrated with him because he was super tight on giving credit. And he said something very simple, conceptually, that, I think like a shopkeeper. If someone is not able to pay, I don't want them to take the merchandise and then chase them down for it. I'd rather keep the merchandise and sell it to somebody else. So it's getting exaggerating a bit, like the old cash on the barrel head. But no matter what, it's being really strategic about who you give credit to going forward. And this will be something that we'll hear a lot about because you have.
Look, I totally agree. I've seen a situation where in the past few weeks where a major retailer or a major supplier to retailers has turned off the supply tap. So they bring stuff out of China, and they've looked at all of their customers and said, well, you know what? I don't think that a lot of these are going to survive. The doors are all closed or closing, or the foot traffic is down so much as in centers. So what they've decided to do is they've said, here's what we want you to do. If we're going to process this order, first of all, you need to pay COD for this order, but we'll only ship it to you after you pay all of your outstanding debts. So what we're seeing on retail is a cash flow crunch from both ends.
Yes.
The revenues have dropped significantly, but equally, some of the middlemen, for want of a better term, they're crunching that cash on the other end, which is what is kind of unseen through the economy. But considering that, they're doing that for a reason, because they don't think some of these suppliers are going to last.
Exactly.
So perhaps changing those terms that you've got with your customers, some for dodgy customers or unquestionable or even very new customers, making them COD might be an idea. Just because we've always done it that way, the sole objective for a business owner now is business continuity.
It is. So a couple things, and we should move on to our next piece, but a couple things I've seen people doing. Going to large vendors as a company and asking for longer terms or bigger early payment discounts. So if you got 60-day terms, go ask for 90, and the right organizations will do it in some cases. Or, there used to be a thing going back years ago where there was big early payment discounts, like 210 net 30 used to be big on terms. It's all going to come back, but I bet you can get more than 2 points discount if you pay early. No, I'm serious. So you can negotiate either end of that. And the philosophy of business is, hey, if I negotiate it with you, Brad, it's part of our agreement. Cool. Like then you're happy, I'm happy. Short paying you and taking off a discount, not cool. Paying you in 6 months, not cool. But it's an opportunity to negotiate terms. People will get back to probably taking more credit cards for instant pay. All kinds of stuff that when times were tough, people did will probably come back. So there's lots of other things around. The main thing I think that for us to look at, and the thing for you guys to think about is that if your profitability starts to drop, that creates a cash crunch because there's less dollars left at the end of the day. And if your payables stretch, that creates more of a cash crunch. Then if you have inventory and it doesn't sell and your inventory levels balloon, that creates a cash crunch. So you can have a battle on 3 fronts when it comes to cash very, very easily. So we got to separate out and make sure that we're paying attention to those things and really thoroughly becoming masters of cash. And So I want to move on, Brad, and just on the, what's happening here. And, you saw some very interesting and almost brain twisting data today that you shared with me from the Australian government. And what we want you to get here is that there are certain perspectives but there's many other possibilities. You got to be open to different things. So Brad, you want to share that with us? That was
Yeah, so this is clearly only for those on the video, but we'll try to explain it as best we can for those on the podcast.
mhm.
So let me see if I can share my screen here. Okay, so this was announced. Prime Minister of Australia and the Chief Medical Officer produced this data yesterday, and this is the data that they've been modelling around. This is from the Australian Financial Review. It's their data, or it's their chart. But I want to hone in on the graph at the bottom, and we're all familiar with this concept of flattening the curve. Australia has been pretty good at flattening the curve, but what we can see is three graphs: a very high peak in a light blue line, a medium-sized peak in a dark blue line, and then an orange line, which is the typical sort of flattened curve. And what they said is that we're on track. We've been doing great work to flatten the curve. But the really interesting thing that no one picked up on is that the axis at the bottom of this graph says that Australia is on track to peak in week 43 after the outbreak, which is around Christmas time. So that was interesting.
And if you look at the chart, for those that can't see it, the volume area of the number of cases that it hits, it looks like it's a similar number of humans who get infected or affected, but it's in an Australia model, they're just spreading it out over a long period of time so the systems don't get overloaded at any point. But the cumulative numbers look actually fairly similar. So it's almost like let's do it slowly. And as you and I chatted before, not put our hospital system into overcapacity and crisis, but that, yeah.
Yeah, and that's interesting because what they're saying is that Australia's done really well. We're one of the lower countries on the graph. At this point, we're on track to have 100% of people who need an ICU bed to be able to get an ICU bed. And that's clearly very important. But all of that health data comes back to, what does that mean for me? And that was quite shocking for me when I read it. And also you, Kevin.
Yes.
We can see from that graph the end of the curve. And we've flattened the curve because of quarantine, isolation, and social distancing. New Zealand's doing a different job to us. They've gone quite a bit harder. But what we can see there, it doesn't get back to where it is now in terms of the number of cases per day until week 60 after the virus. So this is quite a long time that the government is modelling around, and we've got to be really conscious of that. Which brings me back to my earlier point. Right now, if you've controlled cash, you need a business model that will be profitable for the foreseeable future. There's no other more. You've got to stop the bleeding and create a cash flow positive model.
So if you're going to go to the brutal facts and worst case kind of scenario in this model in Australia, does this apply to other countries? We don't know. Different countries are taking different measures. But what it has us think from an Australian context, and even where I'm in Vancouver, we flattened the curve dramatically in our province. But it looks like it's a year before things would be, quote, back to normal-ish in Australia from just a cases or medical level. That's not talking about the economy.
Yeah.
So fast. And the point of it is different perspectives, different data, and be prepared for this to not be a woohoo, here it comes, here it goes. It could be longer, and what's your plan to sustain that? So should we switch gears to our second kind of point of this, Brad? Just checking on time here. Yeah, should we switch gears and touch on the last one for a couple of minutes?
Very quickly, yeah. So a sub question is, how do I deal with my people? I've built a great team, or I've built a good team, perhaps, depending on where they're at.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. So I built it's been hard to get these people. I've got a lot of A players in my organization. And how do I deal with them? I know I've got to control my costs. I know I've got to be cash flow positive. What should I do with my people? What's the right thing to take? So what's your thoughts on that, Kev?
Yeah, well, it's interesting talking with people. I mean, some people are in massive hiring mode. Again, there's a lot of people in certain businesses that are actually thrilled about what's going on because there's some great people that other people have to lay off at this point in time. And they have an opportunity for them to offer a train that's on a mission somewhere and strong and resilient. So for some people, there's a great opportunity. There's the other piece about engagement and morale and how do we keep our people engaged. And again, some companies have done an amazing job. Like one of the companies we work with, they're having beer Fridays. So Friday at 4, everyone goes and cracks the beverage of their choice. They get on a video conference and have chat, tell stories. You know, they're playing video games. They're a health tech company. They got video game night once a week or on a regular basis. You know, they have all kinds of activities. They've got their daily meetings. Their team is fully engaged. So from a sprint perspective, it's been awesome. But their question now is, how do we sustain this? Knowing there's going to be people working from home. There's going to be people working around their kids while they're teaching their kids school and all these other things. So one is, what do we do to keep our people connected? And what they did that's smart is they separated out the social time from the work meetings.
Yeah.
So if you don't have that social time, the work meetings become social time too, because people like actually require it and they need it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's the engagement piece, and I'm seeing lots of great things that people are doing, like lots. And then the layoff or reduction piece, I mean, in many ways, this is where you need to be, it's a combination of mathematics multiplied by your core values is the way that I've seen people do it. Yeah, mathematics, what does your P&L tell you and your cash flow, right? Like for example, one company figured they would lose, it's a couple $100 million business, but they figured they would drop into a half a million dollar loss in this month.
Yeah.
And they looked at their cash and they said, and based on their culture, they're willing to lose $500,000, like give up, which is giving up, you know, they should be making, you know, a couple $1,000,000 a month profit. They're willing to give up $500,000 to take care of their good people.
Yeah.
But after a couple of months, the cash says, that's all you got. Like you've spent your loss budget. So
yeah.
So basically it's mathematics. What does the profitability and cash flow tell you? Multiplied by your values, because some companies would not give up $1 million of profit.
Yeah.
And some companies would give up $100 million of profit. That's your values piece. But so let the numbers guide you, oversee that with your values, and away you go.
I guess what I've been really interested in is right now, this is where leadership comes to the fore.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a lot of leaders who are struggling because suddenly their team has been forced to work remotely, and they're like, how do I know they're working? How do I know they're doing things? So if you haven't embedded things like weekly meetings and daily huddles and metrics, and you haven't been a strong and good leader, and you haven't helped to grow your team around that, like you are suffering the cost of that. The real true cost of a lack of leadership is being paid right now in tangible, physical, and monetary ways.
Yeah, because those people are just going to be floating at home.
Yeah. Yeah, they're watching movies right now. That's what they're doing. They're Netflix and chilling.
Yeah, you know, and it's interesting because our clients are probably not a great representation of businesses as a whole. Yeah. You know, our clients tend to be more invested in being excellent and growing and learning. And so it's interesting with, we had another group of CEOs this morning, and we asked the question, from your experiences, productivity up, dramatically up, the same, down, or dramatically down? Yeah. For 75% of the people, it was up or dramatically up. So the clients that we work with are seeing more productivity, which is amazing, right? For their office-based teams, more, and there was a couple that are seeing less and are having concerns, and then we asked them, well, what are you thinking in terms of going forward? Are you going to do more working from home, same, or less? And again, about 2/3 were more work from home. So some people have a great experience, but again, maybe I'm bragging a little bit about our clients, which is like yours, Brad. It's just because they have the meetings, they have goals. You don't know. And what's that?
Maybe you are, but it's okay.
but no, but because they're well equipped because they're already aligned. And for those of you, you know, if you're listening, daily meetings are magic at this time for keeping a team in sync.
Oh yeah.
Because it covers off a little bit of the social and tactical, what do we got to get done? And that's, 10 minutes a day per team. And having clear goals. And many people are getting down to daily and weekly goals just to help people focus amidst all the chaos. But people need a long-term vision to hold on to, and then something to focus on today so they don't get lost. And when people have really clear goals, ideally KPIs to go with them, productivity is so darn obvious. And by the way, if you run that system, the weak performers or those who don't want to produce are probably already gone, because the system would have exposed their work ethic and capability already.
Yeah. So we're getting towards the end. How are you feeling about today, Kevin? Like, this was our first episode. Do you think it's worth doing another one?
I think, you know what, it's fun. I mean, look at you and we always love our conversations, Brad.
Yeah.
And in many ways, we're just letting people into some of the conversations because we want to share what we're seeing.
Yeah.
And we have different perspectives. So I think we should do it again.
All right, let's have another one and we'll see how we go. Yeah, I think we covered up some good stuff. I'd encourage people to contact either of us if they've got some questions that they've got. And we'll try to balance that out between the questions that we're seeing, covering off. Yeah. How often do you think we should do this, Kevin?
Once a year? My intent is to do it every week. Like, let's just make it a discipline.
Let's just see if we can do it every week. That sounds fair.
I think we'll do that. And we'll just keep coming with questions. Like, one of the questions in the next couple of weeks is, how do we get back to work?
Yeah.
Like, what do we have to do to get it so people are comfortable getting back to the office, taking public transit again? So how do we get to back to work will be one of the ones we have coming up. Lots of others. If you got some, share them with us. So, hey, anyways, thanks for listening, you guys. This has been the Growth Whisperers podcast. I'm Kevin. It's my good friend, Brad. And you can get the video on our YouTube channel as well. We will have that set up, and there'll be a link here somewhere, which we'll get to you with this episode or next. And we'll get organized. We're just making it happen. To reach myself, you can go to lawrenceandco.com. It's Lawrence and Company Growth Advisors. That's the name of our firm, with our coaches and consultants that work around the world. And for Brad, the best way to get you is?
evolutionpartners.com.au.
Excellent. All right. Thanks, Brad. That was fun. To everyone else, have an awesome week, and we'll chat soon.
Thank you.
See you.
Bye.